Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Access. If we haven't met, my name is Jason and one of the pastors here. So glad that you're with us today. We are in part 3 of a 4-part series called Unoffendable. Now, I know this isn't a word, but a few weeks ago, we kind of made it a word, and we've tried to make this something that we aim our lives towards, something that we wrap our hearts around, which is we're asking the question, is it possible that you're going to get offended, but is it possible to somehow get over the offense? Is it possible to live free from and somehow live over the offense that we're definitely going to experience in our life? And I've heard from so many people throughout the series that it's meant something because we're all going to get hurt. Luke 17, Jesus said, you will be offended in this life. And so if you're going to be offended, let's talk about how we can actually deal with the offense that we're all certainly going to feel. And so if it's meant something to you, I'd love for you to do me a favor. Now, if you ever miss a week, you can always go online to access.tv/messages. But I'd love for you to share this. And I've actually heard from people actually around the country this month, which has been really neat to hear because so many people have shared what we've been talking about. And I would invite you to do that. If God ever speaks to you or challenges you, always feel free to share the messages because you never know. One simple share might change somebody's life, which is so cool. Well, if you've missed any of the series, let me kind of catch you up on where we've been. We started week 1 with this simple idea of offense. And this is what we said. Holding on to an offense never hurts your offender. It just lets them keep hurting you. And I just believe with all of my heart that you weren't created to be weighed down by offense, but instead you were created to be free. We read a verse in week 1 that says that God's intention was that we would live a life where our heart is light and free. And if you were to examine your heart, would you say that defines you? Is your heart light and free? Because my guess is for many of us, it's just not. So we said week 1 that offense is a choice, that you can choose what you do when you were offended. And I just told you that it's possible for you to choose to not be offended. Well, then week 2, we talked about forgiveness and how forgiveness is also a choice. And whenever you're handed an offense, it is possible for you to make the decision to let go once and for all and to move past it. Today, I want to spend some time talking about what offense does to our heart and how we can make the decision to have a heart that is clean and pure. And in spite of what happens to us, we can actually live a different kind of life. Now, about a year and a half ago, I told you a story. We had something terrible happen in my house. Now, my wife and I live in a house that was brand new. We were the first ones to live in it, and we love it, and it's beautiful. And the builders told us that when we moved into the house, it is energy efficient. It'll keep the heat out. It'll keep the cool in, and nothing will be able to get into your house. No water, no pests, no animals will get into your house. And so we were like, we're sold on it. Like, we'll take this house. But about 6 months into living in the house, we started hearing these noises at night, the scratching sound. We would wake up in the morning and we would find little shreds of paper in the pantry, little pieces of food just on the ground. And I wanted to blame one of my children for it, but that just felt easier than dealing with what it could possibly actually be. And it was fine when everything was downstairs. You see, we have a 2-story house, and we do most of our life upstairs. So we sleep upstairs, we have a TV upstairs, and so we kind of hang out more upstairs than downstairs. And we started hearing about the mice, and then we had a company come out and start helping us, and we set up traps, and we caught a few, and I was hoping that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. But then there was one day, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back for us. We were sitting upstairs, my wife and me. The kids were already in bed. It was kind of late, and we were watching TV, and all of a sudden, I hear this scream, like this bloody murder scream. My wife screams, and she is off the ground, off the seat, feet in the air. And I said, what? And she points, and there's this little kamikaze mouse shooting across the floor upstairs right in front of us. I mean, the gall of this thing to invade our house. Now, it was one thing when the mice were downstairs. We didn't see them. It's disgusting, but they were kind of out of sight, out of mind. But as soon as one came into our space, it was terrifying. It was gross and just unsettling. And I'll never forget when this happened. Let's play a game. Guess what my wife said when she saw the mouse upstairs? Was it A, I'm moving? Was it B, I'm going to a hotel? Was it C, I'm literally burning this house down? Was it D, save the children? Or was it E, all of the above? It was E, all of the above, because literally in about a 15-second span, she screamed all of these things as one massive run-on sentence, taking no breaths, no commas in the sentence. She screamed all of these, and it just made no sense, but these are all the things that came out of her mouth. Let me ask you this question, okay? When the mouse was in the house, and when we saw the mouse all up in our space upstairs, do you think Liz saw it and said, oh, gross, I'm going to bed? No, because you can't rest when that happens. It dissettles you to the core. About 15 years ago, my brother Mike and I were speaking at a church in upstate New York. And we had been there for a couple days, and the church put us in this house that was on the same property as the church. And the room that we stayed in had 2 twin beds. And so in that season, Mike was dating a girl, and he was in that weird stage of the relationship where he was embarrassed to talk to her on the phone in front of me. And so he left and was talking to his girlfriend. I was engaged. I had talked to my girlfriend, soon-to-be wife. I gotten in bed and I was falling asleep, and I hear Mike come back into the room a little bit later, and I can hear it. My eyes are closed, but I hear him walk in. I hear him get in bed, and like 15 seconds later, he lets out this blood-curdling scream. So weird, so strange. And it's like, ow, oh, ow, ow, oh. And I'm like, what? He goes, ow. He jumps out of his bed. He goes, there was a wasp in my bed. Literally in between the sheets, there's a wasp. And then when you're angry, irrational things come out of your mouth. He points at me with anger, like fire in his eyes, and he says, you did this to me. Like, of course I did. I Mr. Miyagi did. I had chopsticks, saw a wasp, caught it, put it in your bed, tucked it under the sheets, and waited. That's what I did, right? Anger causes us to say irrational things, to do irrational things, but he's mad at me, he's yelling at me because there's a wasp in his bed. Now let me ask you a question. Once the wasp was in his bed, do you think he thought to himself, well, it's already stung me once, what's the worst that can happen, and got back in bed with it? No. Because if there's a wasp in your bed, you do anything you can to get rid of the wasp that's in your bed. If there's a mouse in your house, it's dissettling. I've never had a snake in my house, but if there was a snake in my house, I literally would spend any amount of money, hire any professional it takes to get rid of the snake in my house. Why? Because it doesn't belong there. Now, I could spend a lot of time talking about how it got in. I could spend a lot of time wondering why it was there in the first place. But instead, in the moment, my only concern would be getting it out, right? Wouldn't you be the same way? If you had some sort of pest in your house, you don't care how it got in, you just want to get the sucker out of your house. Now, what's fascinating to me is we all understand that. If you had a snake or a mouse or a wasp in your house, you would just do anything you can to get it out. And yet, I believe there's something more harmful that happens to us, and it's like we don't even really seem to notice. We don't even really seem to care. I believe that things have this way of getting lodged in our hearts. And what happens is stuff gets lodged in our heart, and it's like instead of caring how it got there, instead of worrying about trying to get it out, we defend why it was there even in the first place. Well, Jason, if you knew what they said to me, well, if you knew how he treated me, if you knew the stuff I walked through, if you felt my pain, you would understand why that frustration and that anger and that unforgiveness and that resentment, you would understand why all of it's stuck in my heart. And I just want to say to you, you were created to be light and free, not weighed down, and your heart of all things should be a place that you protect. The wisest man to ever live, Solomon, said it like this in Proverbs 4. He said this, Proverbs 4:23, above all else, which means like above everything, nothing else matters more than this. He says, guard your heart. The word guard in Hebrew literally means stand watch over. Like a guard at a prison with a rifle in his hand, you do whatever it takes to guard or stand watch over your heart, for everything, not some stuff, everything you do flows from it. Other translations of the Bible say your heart is the wellspring of life, or all the issues of life emanate from your heart. Now, if this is true, and I believe it is, don't you think we should pay attention to our hearts? Don't you think we should watch the stuff that gets in and begins to choke out the life that God has for us? I really just think we should. Now, all kinds of things get stuck in there, and what's fascinating about all the things that get stuck in our heart is they all have transactional language associated with them, kind of a debt and a debtor relationship. Some of the things we can see, others of the things we look in the mirror and we don't even see them in us. Here are 4 simple examples. The first one is we have guilt. Guilt crowds out our heart. And what guilt says is, I owe you. I have wronged you. It's almost like a debt and a debtor relationship. I'm in debt to you until I can somehow pay you back. And so we feel guilt. And guilt has this way of devastating our heart. Another thing we feel is we feel greed. And greed's kind of the opposite. Greed is all about me. It's like, I owe me. It's treat yourself. It's all about making me happy and me getting the stuff that I feel like I deserve. The problem is that you can never satisfy a heart that is greedy. Materialism chokes out your capacity to love. It's fascinating how this works. Another thing that gets lodged in our heart that we have to be on guard for is jealousy. And jealousy, it says, God owes me. And this is interesting because what jealousy does is it causes us to look to the left and to the right and look all around us to see what other people have, to see the happy life and the happy family, and you're single and you want the husband or you want the wife, and we look all around us at all the things happening around us and we say, God, you owe it to me. God, where's mine? I've been good. I've been giving. I've been loving. I've been serving. I've been helping other people. God, what about me? What about my needs? What about taking care of your boy here? What about me? And jealousy says God owes me. But I want to talk today about this last one because this is the one that I think gets into so many of our hearts and we don't even realize it. And many times we don't deal with it for generations, and it has devastating consequences to those around us. And it's the issue of anger. Anger says, you owe me. And in an anger relationship, a relationship fueled by anger, what happens is you get into a debt in a debtor relationship and someone owes you. Sometimes they don't even know that they're in debt to you in some capacity. And what happens is you walk through your life with a chip on your shoulder and a fracture in your heart. And I just want to say to you, it is entirely possible for you to get rid once and for all of anger. Now, here's what you need to know about anger. We think anger is about the stuff that happens to me. It's about getting cut off in traffic, and it's about not getting the call for my football team. Anger is not that. In fact, if you have your notes, anger isn't an issue of circumstances. It's an issue of the heart. Anger is not about what's happening around me. Things are going to happen around you. It's about your heart. This is an issue of the heart. And Solomon says, pay attention to your heart, guard your heart. For everything in life that matters to you, it all flows out of your heart. So if it's true that we all understand what anger is, then we have to figure out what do we do with it. Now today, I want to spend a lot of time not talking about getting angry, because you're going to get angry. Someone's going to mess you up. Someone's going to lie to you. Someone's going to steal to you. A relationship's going to fall apart, and it won't be your fault. You're going to get angry. I don't want to talk about those moments, though, where you flash anger. I want to talk to you today about what do you do with the anger that maybe you've carried for a lot longer than you ever should possibly carry it. Maybe you've carried anger from season to season to season to the point that you've forgotten where the anger even started, and you're like a grenade that's rolled. And eventually what happens to a person that carries anger for so long is they explode, and everything and everyone in their path eventually catches the shrapnel from a heart that is consumed by anger. Now, if that feels devastating, I want to give you some hope. The Apostle Paul writes this letter from prison to a church in Ephesus. It's called the book of Ephesians. And Paul writes from prison. Now, pay attention, because this isn't from Cancun, or he's not writing from Maui. He's writing from a devastating place, a place where he would rightfully feel anger. And he gives the people that are reading this letter, he gives them some hope that I hope is hope for you today. Ephesians 4, we'll start in the beginning of the book. He says this, as a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you've received. Paul says you can step up your life to an entirely different level, the level at which God sees you. Verse 2, he says, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, not angry, be patient, bearing with one another in love. So when you feel that desire to blow up at someone, there's a different way that you can respond. Step your game up, Paul says. And then if you read the chapter, Ephesians 4, it's fascinating, all the different examples of ways Paul shows us that we can live a life higher than the life we're living now. But in Ephesians 4, 25 and 26, or 26 and 27 that we're going to read, it's interesting how Paul says this is what you can do with the anger that you carry. He says this, he says, be angry, which means you're going to get angry. Maybe you're looking at this, you're like, oh, I finally found my life verse. Get angry, right? I'm good at that. I'm good. Good God, I got it. That's not what he means. He says, be angry, but you're going to get angry. And so when you get angry, he says, here's what you do with it. Do not sin. Be angry and do not sin. Don't you want to get revenge when someone hurts you? Don't you want to get even? Don't you have this debt and debtor idea when it comes to anger? Someone hurts you, someone wrongs you, and you just want to get revenge. You want to get even. You want to get paid back for the wrong that's been done to you. Don't you want that? Because I know I want that. This week, just for fun, I Google searched websites for revenge. And there's all kinds of fun things that you can do to get even with people. There's all kinds of things you can do to get revenge. You can send people a box that looks like a package from Amazon, and when they open it, literally a glitter bomb explodes and it shoots glitter everywhere. How terrible and awesome is that at the same time? You can sign people up for all kinds of phone calls. You can sign them up for a call that just calls over and over and over again. You can sign people up for a fax phone call. You know that sound a fax machine makes when it's receiving a fax? You can sign them up for a call, and it gets from different numbers all the time, so they never know which one it is. And when they answer the call, it's just a fax machine noise. That's awesome. You can sign people up for magazines. You can sign them up for a cat fact of the day. What is more terrible than that? Who wants that? And so you can do all kinds of terrible stuff to people to get revenge, and that's what we want to do, right? When someone hurts you, don't you want to get even? Don't you want to get revenge and to even the score? He says, be angry and do not sin. And then he reaches into the culture. You see, in that culture, there was this phrase that went around. In the same way we would say, don't cry over spilled milk, there was this phrase that went around, and it's a very popular phrase. You've probably heard it at a wedding. He says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Now, this was a very popular phrase in the world in which Paul lived, but the simple idea means this: don't let the sun go down and you still have anger in your heart. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a wedding where this was said, but I've been to a lot of weddings, and this is typically how it plays out. There's the wedding ceremony, and then at the reception, they'll do some sort of a fun game or gesture where they acknowledge the couple that's been married the longest. And usually the way this works is so funny. They'll have the longest married couple give advice to the newest married couple, which is the bride and groom at the wedding. And I've heard this at probably at least a dozen, maybe more weddings, where they'll say, the best advice we ever got was never to go to bed angry at each other. And that's probably good advice, but that probably also explains why you see some married couples who are so exhausted, right? Because they stayed up till 2 or 3 or 4 or just all night, or they just pulled 2 or 3 all-nighters in a row working through their issues. Now, maybe that's good advice. Maybe it is. I don't really know if it's good advice or not, but here's what I do want to say. I think there's something more profound than that. Like, it's good for your heart to not go to bed angry. But I think more importantly than this, what Paul is inviting us to do, go back if you would, please. What Paul's inviting us to do is he's inviting us to close the book on seasons of our life where we're angry and to not carry that anger into the next season. See, what happens to so many of us, we get hurt and we get wounded and we get abused. And so we take that pain and we literally carry it into the next season, and we carry it into the season after that. And there's all kinds of devastating ramifications that I want to talk about in just a moment. But then Paul dips back into theology and he says, here's the reason that you need to make sure you close the book on anger in this season before you enter your next season. He says this, verse 27, he says, and give no opportunity to the devil. Now, I don't know if you believe in the devil. Statistically, most Americans claim to believe in God. Very few Americans, percentage-wise, claim to believe in Satan or the devil. I do, and the reason I do is because Jesus did, and so that's enough for me. Like, whatever he says, I'm just with him. That's how that works for me. But here's what Jesus says. When you carry anger and when it consumes you, what ultimately begins to happen is you give a place or an opportunity to the devil. It's essentially like saying to Satan, hey, my heart's open. Come on in, have a seat, get something to drink, put your feet up. That's what he's saying. Another translation of the Bible, another variation of it, says it like this. In the NIV, it says, and do not give the devil a foothold. Now, the best example I can give of this is in my last house I lived in, my 2 boys, Joey and Gavin, they were just playing. They were kind of like fighting and messing with each other. And they had gotten to the point where one was chasing the other, and Joey was chasing Gavin. My younger one, Gavin, was chasing Joey. That's what was happening. And Joey ran and he tried to get into his room and he tried to shut the door. But as he was shutting the door, Gavin, who was younger, literally put his foot in the door so the door wouldn't shut. And I just remember watching this happen, and I hear Gavin, who's got his foot in the door, basically allowing his way in. He goes, ha-ha, sucker! Just like that. Like, I'm a great dad. I taught him that. That's what happened. But here's what Gavin understood. If he had his foot in the door, that's the only thing that he needed, and eventually he would get leverage. In the same way, what Paul is telling us about anger is this, is when anger is in your heart, what happens is you give the devil a foothold. You give him an opportunity to enter in and to devastate every part of your life. Now, here's what you need to know about anger. Paul says, and do not let the sun go down on your anger, right? That's what he says. I think here's what happens. What happens to so many of us is if we don't resolve the issue, we carry the anger from one season to the next, to the next, to the next, and eventually we get so far removed from the original point of anger that we forget who we're even angry with in the first place. So then what happens is we're a wounded, fractured person 2 or 3 seasons later, and everything catches the brunt of our anger. Every relationship, all of our family, all of our kids, all of our work relationships. It's like something dumb and insignificant happens, and we explode in anger, and everyone around us catches shrapnel. The reason that this is important is this. If you have your notes, when the sun sets on one season of your life, it is easy to lose sight of the original source of your anger. So what happens is we don't resolve it. We think time heals all wounds. Time doesn't heal all wounds. Jesus heals all wounds. What time does is it blurs our vision to what actually happened in the first place. So my question to you is, are you an angry person? Would the people in your life that love you and know you the most, would they say that you're an angry person? Because if you are, I really believe that there's some hard work that I want to invite you to do so that once and for all you can make the decision to let go of the anger that consumes our heart. Now, last week I ended with this verse, which is just a few verses from the ones we just read. And Paul gives us some instructions on how we can finally make the decision to let go once and for all of the anger. Here's what he says. He says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. He says, do whatever it takes to get rid of it. Now, this is interesting if you've ever studied Greek. In Greek, when they write a sentence, whatever the most emphasized word is, often it gets placed at the front of the sentence. So in this sentence, the word all would be at the beginning. So it'd be like all. Get rid of all bitterness. All. Get rid of all of it. And he uses this language, this word get rid of, literally means you do whatever it takes to get rid of it. Tonight, before I go to bed, I will push my trash can and my recycle bin out to the curb because Monday morning is the day that my trash and recycles get picked up. I will push it out there, and I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to walk back into my house, and I'm going to make the decision that once it's gone, it's absolutely gone. Paul says in the same way, you make the decision that when it comes to that anger in your heart, you're literally going to push it out, you're going to set it, and you're going to leave it once and for all because you're deciding that you're going to get rid of it. Here's the best analogy I can give you. Have you ever gotten a terrible diagnosis from the doctor? You ever gotten a diagnosis for a loved one or a friend of yours, and the doctor says it's cancer or it's some sort of a disease? You know what's interesting in that moment? You don't spend time sitting there thinking, I wonder where I got that. I wonder if it's genetic. I wonder if I caught something that maybe led to this, which led to that. You don't spend any time thinking about that. You spend all of your energy and all of your emotional energy pursuing the fact that I've just got to get rid of it. Like, I don't care how I got it. If there's cancer in my body, I don't care how it got there, just get rid of it. And what's interesting to me is so many people, they walk around with anger in their heart and they spend time defending how it got there, not worrying about how to get rid of it. Paul says, stop defending it. Yeah, Jason, you don't know what I've walked through. You don't know the pain or the remorse. You have no idea what she said. He took the credit from me at work and he got the promotion. She walked out on our marriage. He lied to me for years. Okay, is it meaningful? Yes. Did it hurt you? Yes. Am I trying to minimize it? In no way. But if you said that to Paul, do you know what Paul would say? Paul would say, get rid of all of it. You make the decision once and for all that you're not going to live in this way. And then the next verse, he says this, and here's how you should respond. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ, God forgave you. You've been forgiven of an inexhaustible amount, and you can now in turn forgive those who have hurt you and slandered you and abused you and walked out on you. You can make the decision that once and for all, because God has forgiven you, now you can forgive others. So here's what this looks like. Getting rid of anger, if you have your notes, this is so important. Getting rid of anger is more important than getting paid back. Getting rid of anger once and for all is more important than getting even. It's more important than making things right because it's about your freedom. It's not about justice. It's about freedom. It's not about justice. And for so many people, we just want to even the score. But can I offer you this thought? Getting even and getting paid back, it's all an illusion anyways. If your mom and dad sat down with you when you were 6 years old and said, honey, we love you, but mommy and daddy, we're going to get a divorce. We're going to separate. And it broke your heart and you've carried anger for 25 years. And if they sat you down and said, we're so sorry we made such a terrible mistake, please forgive us, you can forgive them, but you can never get the 25 years that you lost of your mom and dad being together back again. You just can't do that. If a person stole your idea at work and they got the promotion over you, and they stole the idea, and as a result of that, they got the promotion and you didn't, and they got the raise and you didn't, and 10 years later, they come back to you and they say, I am so sorry, I know I did wrong, I know I wronged you. You can't go back and somehow make that right. If someone abused you, if they hurt you, if they assaulted you, if they did something wrong to you, you can't go back and fix all the tears you cried. You can't go back and erase all the pain you've walked through. So the idea of trying to get even, it's honestly just an illusion anyways. So here is how I think we should respond. 3 things. First thing is this is hard, but you have to make the decision to identify who you're actually angry with in the first place. You see, you may look around and think, well, I'm angry at him, I'm angry at her. You may be elbowing the person you're sitting next to now. Please don't do that. That's not the point. But you may think that I'm angry with everyone around me, but maybe that's true, but honestly, probably it's not. Usually, a person who is angry, who has a short fuse in life, most likely who they're angry at has nothing to do with the people who are in their life in this season. Most likely, it has to do with something that happened to you a long time ago. So this is hard. Allow your heart to go on a journey where you discover where are you angry. Maybe you're angry with someone. Maybe you're angry at a circumstance. Maybe you find yourself even angry at God. God, why did I get cancer? God, why did I lose a child? Why did I lose a loved one? Maybe you just find your heart so angry, and you have to make the decision to figure out who is it? Who hurt you? What situation wronged you? And go back as far back as it takes and identify who that is. And the second thing you have to do is so important. You have to decide what was taken from you. Now, this is so hard. This is so difficult. This isn't a 1-hour session with a therapist. This is you may need to keep a note on your phone where you write down all the things that you feel owed, all the things that you feel like you lost out on, all of the stuff that you feel like has been wronged to you. Keep it all on a list. Here's the reason this matters. If I owed you a lot of money for some reason, a lot of money, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, if I owed you a lot of money, and you just said, Jason, I love you, I just want to forgive you of all the debt, I just want to forgive you of all of it. That might mean a lot to me, but you know what would mean a lot more is knowing specifically what you are forgiving me of. I believe in the same way. A lot of us as Christians, what we try to do is we try to make these blanket statements. Well, fine, I've been wronged, but I guess I have to forgive. So we make this big umbrella statement. I just forgive the people who hurt me. That's better than nothing. But then what happens in 5 years later, you're listening to the radio and there's a lyric to a song and it reminds you of that day or that moment or that incident or that occurrence, and you remember it and it devastates you, and all of a sudden you're flooded with all the emotions and all the pain and all the regret and all the remorse, and all of a sudden you're dealing with the same bitterness once and for all. You see, the reason you have to determine and decide all the things that were stolen and taken from you and all the things you were robbed of is so that you can have an accurate list of everything you're going to forgive. The final step is this. Once you have that list, you have to cancel the debt. I actually have this recommendation, and this is strange, but I actually recommend that you make this as ceremonious as possible. You say, what does it mean? Well, to me, this means that maybe you need to write everything down and you need to light it on fire. Maybe you need to write it down, you need to cut it up into a billion little pieces. Maybe you need to cut it into a billion little pieces and you need to go to the ocean and pour it out in the ocean and just watch as the waves crash in and take it out and move it to the point where you'll never see it again. I heard a story of a woman who wrote everything down and then she literally buried it in her backyard and she put a little cross in the ground where she buried it. And she said the times that she felt compelled to feed back into those negative emotions, the time when all the feelings came rushing back in on her, she just looked back in her backyard and she saw the cross and it reminded her that she canceled the debt, that it was gone once and for all. You see, canceling a debt isn't about justice. It's not about getting even or getting paid back or making things right. It's about your heart being free. Here's a question for you. If this is hard for you, pick a date on the calendar that you've made the decision that you're no longer going to be angry, because otherwise you'll carry it for the rest of your life. What would it look like if you were free? What would it look like if your heart was finally free to pursue the life God has for you? I think it would change absolutely everything. Here's what you need to know. Forgiveness, it breaks the power of anger. If you're an angry person, if you find yourself able to snap at the littlest thing, it is possible that anger has controlled your heart. And in the same way that if you had cancer in your body, you wouldn't care how it got there, you would just fight to get it out. I challenge you to do whatever it takes to forgive. so that you can get the anger out. Identify who is the source of your anger. Decide once and for all, what did they owe you? What did they rob you of? How did they actually wrong you? What did you miss out in life because of them? And number 3 is you have to decide to cancel the debt, because forgiveness, it breaks the hold of anger in your life. So here's how I'm going to end today, a little different than normal. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes, and we're just going to take like 30 seconds. And you might need a lot longer than this. You might need months for this, but I challenge you to think through your life and ask the question, who has hurt you? Who has offended you? Who has wronged you? And if you're going to live this unoffendable life, you have to start by beginning to forgive. So now in these next few seconds, will you think through that question, who has hurt you? Who has wronged you? Because you can't forgive unless you know who. Now let's pray. God, this one is so much easier to talk about than it is to do. This one is so challenging, but I pray that you'll give us the courage to step into it and to actually be people who guard our hearts, who weed out any form of anger that exists in our hearts so that our hearts can be light and they can be free. God, I thank you for Paul's words, that we shouldn't let the sun set, not just on a day, but on a season of our life, without dealing with the issues of our heart. So for God, those of us who have identified a person or a time or a moment, whether angry with a person or a thing that happened or a circumstance or even angry with you, I pray that we'll have the courage to walk through the steps so that we can find healing for our hearts, so that our souls can be made right again. God, I thank you that your desire is that our hearts would be free. So help us to do the hard work of canceling the debt, so that our hearts can be set alive and set free. We thank you for it, God.